Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into Manta Network. We're looking specifically at the information we've pulled from this detailed overview report, our mission for this deep dive. Basically, cut through the layers, understand what Manta Network actually is, how it aims to work, and why it's positioning itself as like a key player in Web3, what makes it stand out. All based on the insights from this material. Think of it as a shortcut to getting genuinely well informed on this specific project.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about diving into this material is exactly that. It helps you grasp not just the tech details, but the underlying strategic choices and what those choices might mean for Web3 down the line.
All right, let's get right into it then. Starting with the big picture, how does this report describe Manta Network, at its core?
So it's presented as a modular ecosystem built specifically for Web3 and really designed to be a major gateway for ZK, zero-knowledge applications.
Okay, a gateway for ZK apps. Got it. And the architecture mentioned is a modular blockchain using zkEVM.
That's right. And the goal behind this design, well, it seems pretty clear from the report. They want to drive broader Web3 adoption by providing the infrastructure needed, for real scalable use cases to finally emerge.
Right, scalable use cases. Now, you mentioned modular. That's a word we hear thrown around a lot. How does this report explain Manta's modular approach? Why is it highlighted as important?
Well, the report emphasizes that being modular means they aren't trying to, build everything from scratch. Instead, they leverage what they see as best-in-class technologies for different functions. For instance, using Celestia specifically for data availability, that's where the transaction data lives, and using Polygon CDK for their zkEVM component.
So kind of like assembling a complex machine using specialized high-performance parts from different experts.
Exactly. That modularity gives them, remarkable agility, according to the report. They can potentially make faster improvements or integrate new tech without having to rebuild the whole thing.
The report also makes some pretty compelling performance claims, too. Faster transaction speeds than an L1, lower gas costs than many L2s. How does this modular structure, especially splitting out that data layer, help them potentially achieve that?
This is actually one of the core technical points in the material. By separating components, especially that data availability layer, you can optimize each part. So instead of cramming all the transaction details, the call data, onto the base layer, which gets expensive,
Right.
Manta Pacific can post this call data to a specialized, much cheaper modular DA layer, like Celestia.
Ah, so call data is essentially the raw transaction info, the details needed to verify it later. And by not putting all that data onto expensive Ethereum, you cut costs. Is that the idea?
Precisely. Think of Ethereum, it's prime real estate.
Yeah.
Very secure, but very expensive per byte. You need to post the proof there, sure. But storing the bulk of the data, like the receipt, on a cheaper specialized layer like Celestia, well, the report states this drastically reduces the overall transaction cost.
Okay, that makes sense. And why does faster and cheaper matter so much for actually getting more people to use Web3 apps?
Well, for users, friction is just the enemy, right? High fees price people out, slow transactions make apps feel clunky. Reducing those barriers is absolutely critical if we want to move beyond just early adopters. And for developers, cheaper transactions mean they can build apps where users interact more often without huge costs. That could open up whole new possibilities, especially for things like, gaming or social apps.
Totally makes sense. Now, the report is clear Manta Network isn't just one chain. It has two main pillars, Manta Pacific and Manta Atlantic. Let's break those down.
Absolutely. So first you have Manta Pacific. It's presented the modular layer 2 scaling solution built on Ethereum. And a key point the report highlights, it's the first L2 mentioned to make this shift to modular DA, specifically using Celestia for its transaction call data.
So Pacific is directly using that Celestia piece for the cost savings we just talked about.
Exactly. Posting that call data to Celestia instead of Ethereum is meant to significantly cut the cost per transaction on Pacific. The technical evolution described is interesting too. It started with a modified OP stack, but the report says it's transitioning towards a multi-prover system and a full zkEVM.
And using Polygon CDK for that zkEVM means?
It means they're aiming for what's called a Type 1 zkEVM. Think of that as like the highest level of compatibility with Ethereum. It's designed to behave almost identically to the EVM itself. That makes it much easier for developers with existing Ethereum contracts to just move their apps over.
Okay, so Pacific, modular L2 on Ethereum, focused on general ZK apps, low cost via modular DA, strong EVM compatibility. What about Manta Atlantic?
Manta Atlantic is, a very different beast, according to this report. It's described as a layer 1 chain, built using substrate tech. And its focus seems much more specialized. The report specifies its goal is optimal performance for verifying private on-chain identity.
Private on-chain identity. Okay, what does that mean technologically? How does it work?
The report highlights that Atlantic has compiled zk circuits built right into its core runtime. This design is meant to enable what they call the fastest execution for local proof generation. So it's really specialized for those intense, privacy-preserving calculations, verifying digital credentials, identity traits, that sort of thing, quickly on-chain without revealing the raw data.
So a clear division then. Pacific is the Ethereum-aligned modular L2 for low-cost general zk apps. And Atlantic is a specialized L1 built on substrate, optimized purely for high-speed private identity verification.
That's the functional split outlined in the source material, yeah.
Let's poke around under the hood of Manta Pacific a bit more. The report details some key components making it tick. We've already hit modular data availability with Celestia fundamental to the cost story.
Right. Modular DA separates that call data, makes transactions way less expensive than forcing it all onto Ethereum L1. It's a different architectural choice compared to, monolithic chains or even older L2 designs.
The report also mentions permissionless smart contracts. Pretty standard for an L2, right? Developers can deploy their existing Solidity EVM-compatible contracts. But then there's something called universal circuits. This sounds, powerful. What does the report say these are? Why are they important?
This is presented as a really neat tool, basically a library of pre-built generalized zk circuits. The idea is developers can grab these ready-made components, use them with just a few lines of code, and add zk-enabled features to their apps across different areas, DeFi, GameFi, identity, you name it.
So instead of needing to be a deep crypto expert to build a zk feature, a standard Solidity dev could just plug and play with these universal circuits.
That's the promise the report highlights, yeah. It gives any Solidity developer the tools necessary to bake in complex zk privacy or verification without needing that deep specialized knowledge. It significantly lowers the barrier to entry for using zk tech, which, could be a huge unlock for getting wider adoption.
That definitely seems crucial for getting more zk applications actually built. The report also mentions the standard stuff, .zkEVM proving using zk proofs for security, and notes specific aims for Type 1 zkEVM via Polygon CDK, confirming that high EVM compatibility. It also points out Pacific is a public L2, anyone can deploy, and supports native yield for deposited ETH and USDC.
Right. And when you put those pieces together, the cost savings from modular DA, the developer ease from universal circuits, the compatibility from Type 1 zkEVM, maybe user features like native yield, you start to see a platform designed to attract both devs and users, making zk apps more accessible, affordable, easier to build and use.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Let's look at the native token, Manta. The report details its utility and economics.
Yeah, the Manta token is designed with multifaceted utility. It has roles across both Manta Pacific and Manta Atlantic.
What kind of roles are we talking about?
The report lists several. Governance is a big one. Token holders vote on network decisions for both chains. It's also used for staking, which helps secure Manta Atlantic. You can also do collateral delegation for Atlantic and delegate your tokens or run a node yourself. And on the Atlantic chain specifically, Manta is used to pay transaction fees. Finally, it's intended to serve as native liquidity and collateral within services built across the whole Manta ecosystem.
So it's trying to tie the economics and participation together across both the L2 and the L1.
Exactly. It's meant to incentivize users and operators to secure and participate in the whole ecosystem, spanning both chains.
The report gives some specific token numbers too. As of January 15th, 2024, total supply, 1 billion Manta. Initial circulating supply was 251 million. About 25% of the total.
And it's worth noting, the supply isn't fixed there. Additional tokens are planned for emission rewards, likely for validators, stakers, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. And the funding details mentioned are $60.4 million raised through private and public sales, with different percentages sold at various prices. Gives some insight into the project's initial backing.
Yeah, those numbers give you some context on the capital raise and how the initial distribution was structured among early investors and the public.
Okay, finally, let's look at the roadmap and ecosystem mentioned in the report. The roadmap covers plans up to Q3 2024 based on when this doc was dated.
Right, the roadmap shows a pretty clear progression. Key past milestones included launching identity stuff like SIG addresses, CKSBTs, and getting the Manta Pacific mainnet alpha out.
And the upcoming points from that January 2024 perspective included launching the Atlantic mainnet and integrating Celestia DA back in Q4 2023.
Right. Then the focus shifts. Q1 2024 was for testing the multi-prover and zkEVM transition. Q2 2024 aimed for Pacific mainnet beta, bringing multi-provers and zkEVM live, plus testing Universal Circuits 2.0. And by Q3 2024, the goal was Pacific mainnet production I, with Universal Circuits 2.0 also going live on mainnet.
That really outlines a pretty aggressive push to build out the core Promise tech, launching both chains, integrating those key modular and zk components.
Yeah, it shows a project actively working towards implementing that architectural vision described in the report.
The report also highlights some strategic partnerships, building out the ecosystem. We've already talked about Celestia for DA and Polygon for the Polygon CDK zkEVM.
But they also list partners like Layer 0, which is crucial for enabling assets and data to move between different blockchains.
So interoperability, making sure it's not just an isolated island.
Exactly. Space ID is another partner mentioned for integrating human-readable .manta domains, making addresses easier to manage. And QuickSwap, a major Layer 2 DEX, is integrated to provide immediate utility swapping, liquidity farming right there in the Manta Pacific environment.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture, these aren't just logos, right? These partnerships are about knitting together the functionality needed to actually use the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's about building the on-ramps and core services, cross-chain bridges, human-friendly names, immediate DeFi access, making those promised use cases actually possible.
So, wrapping up our deep dive into Manta Network based on this report, we've explored its core idea, a modular ecosystem for zk applications, built on two chains. Manta Pacific, the modular L2 on Ethereum, using Celestia for low costs, moving towards a Type 1 zkEVM, and Manta Atlantic, the specialized substrate L1, really optimized for high-speed private identity verification. We looked under the hood modular DA, those universal circuits, trying to make zkDev easier. And we covered the Manta token's utility across both chains, governance, security, fees.
Yeah.
Finally, we touched on the roadmap showing that push for core tech build-out through 2024 and the partnerships needed for growth and usability.
Right.
The value proposition this report presents seems clear, aiming for faster speeds in L1s, lower costs than traditional L2s, specifically to enable and scale zk applications and identity use cases, which, could be key drivers for bringing Web3 to more people.
This kind of raises an interesting question, maybe something for you to think about as you process all this. Given this push towards modularity, specialized chains like Atlantic for identity, combined with strong cross-chain capabilities, how might this whole approach actually reshape the landscape for decentralized apps? Could this lead to a future where different parts of your Web3 life live on different highly optimized chains, but they're all connected seamlessly?
It's definitely a fascinating potential future this architecture points towards. We've distilled the key insights from this report for you, but, we always encourage you explore the source material yourself if you want to dive even deeper. What stands out to you from this deep dive?